Well, first off, thanks to everybody for joining me. I'm Emily Rose. I'm the founder of Rebind.io. We're a press outlet that specifically tries to focus on micro indies, small studios, pretty much anyone who doesn't typically get the press coverage that we're kind of used to having access to at these bigger industry events. So I wanted to talk about discoverability and how it's become kind of more difficult, especially in the past year, as things have changed. And I think people don't realize how the landscape has shifted and how to take advantage of it. But that's a two-way street, right? It's not just the indies themselves, but it's also the companies that are looking for talent, be they contractors, games to sign on for publishing, so on and so forth. So without further ado, we'll get started. So a few things I wanted to mention just at the start of this is that there's been a lot of VR arcades popping up, and a popular platform with them right now is a service called Springboard. So kind of like the old internet cafes and gaming cafes. You pay a monthly fee to them, and they negotiate licensing deals with indies or anyone on the platform to do sort of like a charging by minute. And in my time speaking to a couple of VR indies and things like that, they don't realize that that's an option for them. And while Springboard isn't like super huge right now, they have been growing quite a bit. And I've seen good results with them at the local VR arcades near me as well. And they treat developers fairly, but they're also fair to the VR cafes themselves. And it's kind of interesting because I see a lot of indies really reticent and scared to touch VR as a platform, which is interesting to me because of the fact that AAA tends to have a hard time conceptualizing of what's a good product to launch there. So for me, it's this like possible ideal space, like a Goldilocks zone for people who want to do new alternative experiences, because at the VR arcades near me, there's a wide set of demographics, and VR is this very like overstimulating, overwhelming like sort of experience for people new to it. And so it's kind of like they want experiences that are a little less action-oriented, that aren't quite so overwhelming. And there's already a lot of market saturation in VR when it comes to action-oriented games. So they like, sort of like shooters or sort of tower defense games and things like that. But what is kind of colloquially referred to as like the walking simulator that has performed pretty well on normal PC, I think has an especially like strong potential home here. And it's something that's really accessible to indie developers who are working with, a stock standard Unity or Unreal development kit, because they can focus on narrative, art, just the general experience. And I think there's a lot of potentiality for that to, again, be just kind of a native genre there. Here's an example of how licensing kind of works when it's negotiated directly as opposed to going through Springboard. I don't have exact figures on this, but they do have them on their website. Arizona Sunshine is a very, very popular VR action game. And it's easily a figure that, when you have so many different stations, it's on a per station basis, versus the one time per month like Springboard fee. It can quickly add up when you have like 8 VR stations being almost like triple, 4 times the amount that you would be paying per month. So I think it's somewhere around the ballpark of like 150, 250 per like license per station when it comes to Arizona Sunshine. So there may inherently be advantages for you to directly negotiate those licensing costs with arcades and things like that, if that's something you're interested in. But Springboard is good if you just kind of want to get a presence out there and you don't want to have to think it through too hard or negotiate too many direct relationships. Another popular topic has been subscription models, which are priced more broadly to traditional games. And the issue with it is that we've all kind of heard about Spotify being really difficult for musicians. You can have millions and millions and millions of play and see only a fraction of that revenue as the artist, let alone as the publisher and everybody else. So I think it's important to be wary and cautious of subscription models out there, especially streaming-based ones, for the fact that we don't want to create an environment that potentially suffocates out smaller developers. because I truly do believe it's a larger ecosystem, and if you don't have those smaller developers, that pressure starts getting pushed on AAA and those who have the resources. Another thing that we move into is curators. Sometimes, I mean, we're all familiar with influencers and YouTubers. But as we've seen a really big decrease, especially over the last year, they've gone from covering, 20 to 30 games as the most popular streamers to slowly dropping down to a couple of their favorite games that their fan base comes to them. They've almost sort of like transformed into talk show hosts in a way, and the fans are there for them and not necessarily the games. So when you do get traction with them, it's not quite the like booming results that we used to see, and it's become more focused on kind of like negotiating promotion deals in the way that we would on like the days of TV and yore, trying to get a product like spoken of. And a lot of people, both indie and on the business side, aren't aware of itch.io, which is a indie marketplace that is a self-publishing platform. I like to kind of think of it as like if you're familiar with Bandcamp, where you have kind of full control of this like templated like publishing page. You can set up pay as what you want, or you can set a prepaid amount, or you can even put your game out there for free. Itch tends to run a lot of their own operations out of pocket. They want to really be accessible to indie developers out there. And what's kind of cool is I notice a lot of really small indies using this as a place to keep their portfolio. Because you're not having to pay hosting fees or entry fees like you would with Steam, or awaiting authorization on platforms like Epic and things like that. So it's really important to take a look through there, because it's been a huge resource for indies, and there's a lot of people on there. It's lower traffic overall, but the trends that I've noticed have pointed towards higher engagement. The kind of people who are on there are going there for the game jams that itch.io curates or acts as a coordinating portal for. It's also complements and coexists really well with Twitter and Tumblr, because of the fact that you can just link to a very simple itch page that's direct and straight to the point. Someone goes to your itch profile or the itch page for your game, and all the information's there: a trailer, a description, the genre classifications and tags, and then a download or purchase link. And it's because of this that it's really easy to link to. You never have to feel like someone's going to get lost on the page. It only goes to the content that you're linking to on it. And because of that, it's really easy to be a big fish in a small pond there. If you have a really impressive commercial product and you decide to launch it on itch first, there are a lot of advantages in that. You're going to get a lot more eyeballs on it than you would in something that's a little more saturated like the Steam marketplace. And the community there is really enthusiastic, because a lot of them are developers or smaller streamers that still have pull with their audiences in discovering and recommending things that they like to play. Horror games do especially well on itch. And the thing about that is, because it's an enthusiast community, and especially one that developers have a large social presence on, there's really minimal toxicity, and there's also just better audience targeting in general. You can kind of get a better picture of who is downloading your games on itch. There's better tag management, and everything's a lot more clear, and you also get a better picture of who the other players in that space are in terms of other developers. You can look up like the top performing horror games. You can look up the top performing RPGs, anything like that. And there's tags for LGBT stuff as well, which is really great that they have that as one of the major category pages that you can investigate. I guess the kind of way I try to think of it is it really comes across as analogous to in fair trade coffee or chocolate, beer, things like that. Customers want to know that things that they consume are ethically sourced. And I think that's going to become an emergent trend in games as well, especially as customers become more socially conscious. They want to know that the developers are getting a fair deal. So if you haven't been looking at these already, and you're working in HR or you're a publisher, talent is going unnoticed. It's one of the few really open platforms where there aren't a lot of algorithmic barriers. With recent changes in how the Steam store curation works and things like that, it's become increasingly difficult to be noticed. It's not the days where you used to just be able to get featured on the front page and have a huge spike in sales. It's getting tougher by the day, especially the fact that, like, with the platform wars kind of going on between the Epic Store and Steam, it creates this very, like, temperamental environment where if you're a little guy, you're going to get lost in it. And that can be very intimidating, and it's very labor-intensive to try and combat. And again, Steam, you're small fish in a big pond. There's so many players in that space. There's so many other developers there, and it's really easy to get lost in the noise, especially nowadays. And itch can be a really good place to build up that credibility and brand before you branch out into other platforms. Now, I mentioned Twitter and Tumblr and how they integrate well, and I think it's because Twitter is, despite its shortcomings, a really good conversation for platforms. It's a really good platform for conversations, especially like short ones. It's a great place to meet strangers, basically, especially people who are already in your industry that you don't have any prior connection to. Because you'll notice a lot of these small indie developers have less than 2,000, 1,000 follower counts. And because of that, they're not getting overwhelmed with interactivity. And because of that, even if you're a recruiter, even if you're a publisher and things like that, you can reach out directly to them and catch their interest and begin a conversation around their work. And developers have tended to not only link their itch pages there, but their art station, their art portfolios, their game portfolios, and it's a really good place to post GIF and other marketing snippets that, like, are eye-catching, that just show up in people's timelines. And that kind of builds into the next thing, which is Twitter has a lot of tastemakers. There's a lot of people who retweet things simply because they just know what looks good to them. Oh, sorry. They know what looks good to them. And because of that, their audiences start to follow them passively to get that same kind of content and to sort of trust in their taste. It's the same principle behind influencers, but it's in a much more low-impact way, and it's a lot easier to get the attention of if you know how. And it's really good for passive engagement. Not everything has to be an active conversation on Twitter or even Tumblr for that matter. They're both like content-oriented and focused. If you post a GIF up there, you don't even necessarily need to have text with it if your bio on Twitter identifies the content in some way or the account is dedicated to that brand. So it's a really good way to, like, broaden your horizons without taking too much time out of your day. So if you are looking for diverse talent that you're having a hard time getting a hold of, especially when it comes to programmers or technical artists, that's a place where they are in droves and really easy to get a hold of. So you don't have to put in a lot of effort if you start following the right people who are good at sort of seeking them out for you. And the same goes the inverse. It's basically a free ambassador network. A lot of people on there are hungry for opportunity. A lot of really talented folks or people who know talented folks. So if you have a job opening and you're looking for a specific kind of, like, culture fit in your company, you can put that out there, give some specifics, and then ask people to signal boost it. And they will generally know at least, like, 5 to 10 people in their social circles, even if it's an extended social circle, that they can pass that information on to. And it's good to put who you are in your bio as well. I want to leave some time for questions here, so I'm going to speed through the next few panels. GIFs go a long way, but consistency and timing matter. Even if it's just a GIF a week, or maybe a GIF a day, or GIFs work best as opposed to still images because they are eye-catching by their very nature of being in motion. So it gives you an opportunity to, like, highlight something special about your game, set piece, or what have you. I kind of already covered about letting diverse candidates know that they're wanted, but, you know, it kind of goes in line with my talk yesterday, the panel I was on. Make them feel comfortable and they'll come to you. That's another thing. Beyond tastemakers as influencers, there's also people who organize game jams. Usually they're game developers, but sometimes they're people who work in press, sometimes they're YouTubers. And that's a great way to get an overview of seeing how people perform as teams and perform under pressure. But on top of that, if someone's running a lot of game jams on itch, they're going to know a lot of talent. So this is an example of kind of the way in which people can build up a presence really quickly. This game, Sable, is sort of like been a fan favorite of late, and they're just short of 30K followers. They have about average community participation, like in terms of conversations, and their tweet reception ranges from whenever they post a GIF of 20 to 30K likes per media post. And that's not even really counting the retweets on top of that, which are usually not quite as many as likes, but we're still talking in the thousands, which is a lot of engagement, it's a lot of reception. Twitter provides some awesome analytic tools. Roller Skate Game kind of came out of nowhere, like about a year ago. He's had less than 98 tweets and has now nearly 10K followers, and very low community participation in terms of conversation, but definitely there. But the GIF tweets are averaging 200 to 300 replies, 1,000 to 3,000 retweets, and definitely really up there in the likes as well. These are examples of like high-end metrics, like sort of on the fringe of it, but it's an example of like 2 points of like what you can do with a lot or a little reach and how to quickly establish yourself there. So if you have an eye-catching game, I wasn't able to get a GIF in here, but like it's sort of like a action-oriented game where you're rolling up and down these skating ramps and you have this like fun gunplay and it just really visually pops on a timeline. People love that. Thank you again for coming. I already explained about Rebind. I do community outreach locally and internationally. And you can find us on Twitter at rebind_io, or I'm Caravan Malice on Twitter. And I'm always open to emails for conversations as well. And I also work with VR arcades in the area to help them do curation. So yeah, if we have time for a couple questions, we've got a few minutes here.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you very much. So anyone want to start the questions, or shall I? I'll start them off then. So with VR Arcade in particular, are you seeing a different kind of audience than you maybe say on the household stuff? You know, the kind of the mobile or the Vives and the HTC?
Yeah, we get a lot of older age demographics, older folks who are in the 40 to 60 age bracket. Small children.
In arcades, really?
Yeah, they come in because you tend to notice groups come in as a family and they all split some time on some headsets, or they revolve out on a headset, and it becomes this much more social experience than people think it is. People are so impacted by a memorable VR game that they're really engaged by it and they want to like talk about it with people who have also experienced it. So even though there's really high performing games like Super Hot and Arizona Sunshine, it's like at one of my local arcades, still the top of the charts is like Google Earth. Tilt brush, things like that. People love that stuff. They absolutely adore it. Escape rooms are big, and even just like cool alternative like art galleries, like the Museum of Other Realities is launching soon, and that's one that we've seen a lot of hype for in terms of like, it's a virtual art gallery that you can go in and explore with other players. So to see like artwork that is exclusive to VR. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it kind of changes the way that you look at the moment of experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that mindset of what we're trying to create, and a lot of the stuff I talk about is about games as a service, an ongoing perpetual experience, but actually this is a very different kind of way of looking at it.